Well, welcome back everyone to the CFO Forum. Paul Seegert here with Gary Bender. He's the real CFO. I'm just happy to be friends with Gary and have gotten to know him through business and respect what he's done to help other CFOs with best practices. So happy to kind of just help coordinate things and help put this together. And I'm going to turn it over to Gary.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. And for the benefit of everybody, Paul and people that Paul knows have helped me at my engineering company dramatically improve our healthcare coverage for our employees and dramatically reduce our costs. So that should be a segue for our first 30 minutes today on what I call healthcare insanity. The second half will be speed dating for CFOs. I'm going to cover everything we've covered since December in 27 minutes. So I normally speak Yankee fast compared to Paul down in Tennessee, but you got to hang on for the ride today. The key part is all of this is backed up by the information, the links on the website. So hopefully you can keep up and this makes sense. Why do I call it the definition of insanity? Most people have their plans renewing January 1st. Most people don't get a call from their broker until November if they're lucky. Why? Because they're required in most states to give 60 days notice. So they have a calendar just like you do. They do not want you going to market. They want to control you. They want to own the account. So again, definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Let me know if you guys are getting dramatically different and better results. You're getting different results. They're 15 to 20% increases. I like to go the other way. So some of you guys and gals in this call are saying, well, HR handles this. And I'm going to say wrong answer. Even if HR does handle this, it's such a big, healthcare is such a big part of your job as CFO. If you're not doing it, you're not, in my humble opinion, and I am a CFO, you're not behaving as a CFO. We understand the cost impact of healthcare. We know it's our third or fourth largest cost in our cost stack. And the CFO is the person that gets to explain it to the board, the bank, and the CEO. HR doesn't have to do the financial analysis, risk analysis, and why you missed budget again. I'll ask you this. Maybe you don't need to worry about healthcare if your top line and bottom line are growing 20% and you can afford a 20% hit to your healthcare expense. Let's get to the softer side. So we all understand the hard cost. We know how hard the job is. We understand the numbers and explaining variances. But stand back as a human, as a manager, as somebody with a spouse and family probably covered on your plan. What's the impact when healthcare costs keeps going up 15 or 20%? Deductibles get raised, co-pays get raised, payroll deductions get raised. So all of a sudden it's a real pain point to a lot of people making $15, $20, $25 an hour. And it's a real pain point to everybody when family deductibles go from $5,000 to $10,000 and co-pays go from $20 to $50 for specialists. So it affects the costs, which we all understand. It affects people, as we just talked about. It affects the reputation of your firm. If everybody is always complaining, won't use the B word, but always complaining about how high my healthcare costs are, what my take-home pay is, and my raises don't keep pace with the healthcare impact. Go into a separate point. Why should the CFO do it? We're trained to understand root causes. We're trained to understand risk and strategy. We're also trained to understand financial structure and how a different financial structure might be a win-win. Better benefits for the employee, lower costs, lower risk, lower future costs for the firm. And finally, we're going to come back to that in a second, but just to finish this slide, it has a huge effect on recruiting and retention. I'll give you a quick 30-second side story. 6 years ago, I met Paul and his cohorts, and they started educating me how to move from a fully funded plan to a better plan. Keep in mind, I have under 50 employees on the plan. I've got a unionized workforce that has a Cadillac healthcare plan I can't do much about. But for my non-union employees, I was in your small community rated group like a lot of you folks probably are. We found a way to reduce in real terms the cost of healthcare over 50% in the last 7 years. So ignoring inflation, we're still down less than 50%. Our PEPY, premium per employee per year, okay, is 50% lower than it was in 2015 and 16. No funny numbers. I'm not picking good years, bad years, guys and gals. We're down 50%. Here's the staggering part. We could be down over 60%, but we chose to eliminate the deductible and eliminate the copay for our employees. Our employees pay a payroll deduction, which is very, very reasonable and hasn't changed in 7 years per week per pay period. And they have no deductible, no copay, no risk. They know their healthcare costs for the year on January 1st. Incredible recruiting advantage, incredible retention, helps our Glassdoor scores. We aren't perfect bosses. We aren't a perfect place to work, but we always get pluses on benefits. So coming back to that, we did it by looking to understand our cost stack. I got a great education from Paul and his buddies. I never knew this. I expected my HR team to know this. I was busy doing other things. By the way, I'm an owner of the company, so I had a lot of real concerns to focus on, but healthcare certainly got my attention. I don't know, and I'm going to assume you don't know any more than I knew 5 years ago. So I didn't even know what we were spending over $1 million a year on, and then, until I got into it. And I found out that our stack looked like everybody else's, 35 to 40% on prescriptions. We were a little heavy. National average seems to be around 30%, fastest growing line item. 27% primary care kind of made sense. 23% hospitalization kind of made sense, and outpatient procedures. So yeah, we looked like the rest of it. We didn't even know that PEPY was the way to look at it. We had changed our headcount a little bit, so it fluctuated. When I looked at it at PEPY, the trend was going up 8 to 10 to 12% every year. And that was net. When I looked at it gross, in other words, our total cost, including what employees were getting whacked with for deductibles and copays, it was solidly double digits, and I understood why employees were upset. So let's come back to, this is all about best practices. First thing is understand your cost stack. If you don't get this information, you still need to understand this information. Understand your PEPY, understand the metrics the industry uses. For example, the average PEPY, so that's premium paid per employee per year, not belly button, as Paul would say, but just count your employees on the plan. Divide your gross premium when the checks you write to your healthcare brokers, okay? Divide that by your number of employees on the plan. And the national average, small company or a large company, national average is going to be around $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 per year. The range is $6,000 to $30,000. Everybody on this call wants to be upper quartile in any performance measure. So if you're at 15K, you're at the bottom of the second quartile. If you're at 5 or 6K, you're in the top of the best quartile. We were over 20. Okay, so I was fighting to not be in the fourth quartile, and I didn't even know how much I sucked because my broker told me our plan was great and could be much worse. So, before I even understood this, I had no idea what my current stack was. I didn't know what my 3-year trend was. I didn't know what was driving it. And I sure didn't have any action plans in place, because I'd do a budget in September, October, get it approved, and we'd get our renewal after our budget was done, and I'd start the year off with one foot in the bucket because I hadn't budgeted enough. I've already said definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Let's just think about think about the environment we're in and the human beings involved. Your broker wants to be your friend. Your broker says he's your partner. Okay. And I'm not bashing brokers here, because your broker doesn't work for you. Your broker works for his brokerage firm, and he can go to market, and I'll just use examples. He can go to market. Let's say you're with United Healthcare today, and you're not happy with the last year or two increases, you're not happy with what you're expecting as a 10 or 12% renewal. Okay. So you know, basically end of October, you get in your broker's ear and says, take it to market. We can't handle this. UHC is good on service. We just can't handle 12%. So the broker hurries up and goes to market. So he goes to Aetna and Blue Cross, who's ever in your arena. But end of the day, he's still working for his brokerage firm. So his boss is going to tell him, you know, renew the account, give a little where you can, just make sure they don't go to a different brokerage firm. Because at the end of the day, we are going to go to who's in the marketplace, UHC, Aetna, Blue Cross, Cigna, who's ever in your marketplace. Can't go out of market because of the restrictions. You want the service, you want the network. So you're stuck with the same thing your broker is stuck with. The only difference is your broker's not working for you. So he can, you know, I go back to hypothetically, but kind of reality this year, you're budgeting 12%. Okay, you might be getting some indication from your broker next month when you talk about what does 2023 renewals look like. You're going to hear 12%. And he's going to justify 12% because, hey, inflation's 9.1% and drugs are going up faster. So you're going to rationalize in our brains, because my brain's no different than your brain. We're going to rationalize, yeah, I expected more than 12%. And let's face it, fuel's up and wages are up. So 12's high, but I'm not surprised by that. Okay, so he drags you along for 4 to 6 more weeks, prefers not to go to market because it's a lot of work. And he's going to tell you how good he's doing when he comes back with the markets at 15, but he got you 14. And you do not have an option on November 15th or December 1st to fire your broker and get a new plan renewed by January 1st. They use the timeline against us. So that's kind of reality of the timeline, reality of even if he's a nice guy or gal as a broker, even if they bring donuts in for Secretary's Day and they bring in pizzas for the renewal, ugly discussion, and they talk you into raising copays and payroll to meet your budget. Again, go back to, you budgeted 12, probably assumed on the P&L that company's costs would go up 10%. So you had to squeeze 2% to your employees. And you rationalize that was affordable, even though you're already at, in my example, you know, 20K PEPY, and they're paying a chunk of it, and it's going up at double digits. So you rationalize all that in your management group and to your board, and the board tends to go along with it because they're seeing the same thing at their company, trying to go up less than 10% and trying not to squeeze too much to the employees to keep the complaints and turnover down. Okay. Well, our group of CFOs came up with a couple of ideas. Your broker's never going to be your partner, okay? But do you even know how your broker gets paid? So one of our best practice is probably the same thing you do for your 401k plan, where your 401k plan, the Department of Labor, I think it was, basically required financial advisors to disclose their 12B1 and other fees and other compensation. So one of our best practice is to basically give your broker a form, your broker and your competing brokers, the people that want to come in and earn your business by another broker. Keep in mind that other broker is same town or the one town over. He's got the same Aetna's, UHC, Cigna's to pull from. So if you like your current service, what makes you think a competing broker is going to dramatically lower your costs? Paul can tell you, a good broker advisor an advisor will tell you, if you get a broker to come in and compete for your business, they're doing it for 2 reasons. You're currently overpaying for your plan, and they see that you're paying over market. Let me digress for a second. It's not on the slide. Every one of us probably fills out a 5,500 form every year. And Paul will tell you, or any of the guys that work with Paul, is they look at 5,500s. Let's say they're in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where Paul's at. He pulls up all the renewals from Tennessee, and he picks a size company, 100 to 200 employees, and he pulls up the 5,500s, and he goes to one of the lines on there that basically shows how much the broker is getting in commissions and fees. And if he sees somebody really raping your account, that's a target account for him. If he sees somebody paying upper quartile fees, he knows he can't go in there and make a fair return on his money, because that CFO is already beaten down the broker to have a right arrangement. So let's talk about that. Best practice is have your broker fill out a how I get paid compensation form. We actually have one on our website. I can send it to you. You can reach out to me. I'll send it to you, walk you through it. The broker will just about pass out when you tell them it's a requirement to sign it. And the suggestion is the reason why it's a requirement is you as the CFO or controller, you are bound by Sarbanes-Oxley fiduciary rules. And regardless of your title, financial executive is bound up by fiduciary rules, which means you have to use your best reasonable efforts to spend your employees' healthcare dollars efficiently. If you don't, you're the bad guy that has not done their CFO job. And remember, we all know this, but I'll repeat it because some people seem to forget it. CFO screws up, it's a fiduciary breach. It is not covered by D&O insurance when you fail to do your job as a fiduciary. So when you go home and tell your spouse that you're getting sued for millions of dollars by an employee class action suit, and they're going to put a lien on your house, you explain to your wife and kids why you thought D&O insurance protected you either being not educated or being lazy or letting HR call the shots on benefits. You have to do your job as a fiduciary. You don't have to take the lowest cost plan, but you better do your job and you better document it in your plan review with your CEO and with your board. We chose this plan. We could find a cheaper plan, but we went with this broker with this plan because of service, whatever it is, but it better be documented just the way you choose a bank or a credit card processor or a work comp carrier. So, Paul, am I totally off base when I say those things?
Nope. It's there's a lot going on behind the scenes, unfortunately, that's not always working in the client's best interest.
That is the nicest way to say it. I believe those are known as incongruent goals, or goals that will never be aligned.
Yeah.
By definition. Okay. So let's come back to some more best practices. Number one, understand your costs and then the cost trends. This is all for your plan. Understand your costs, last couple of years, the cost trends, and what the components are. Prescription, primary care, hospitalization, outpatients. And every year you're going to have the $50,000 or $100,000 NICU baby or cancer treatment. So you're going to do the one-offs, and you're going to find out that basically every year you got a one-off for 5 or 10% of your total cost. That's why you have stop loss insurance. That's why you have deductibles, et cetera. But don't talk yourself into that you're really much better than average if I take out all the bad news, because life doesn't work that way. Number two, 80%, this is an industry fact, 80% of small firms have first dollar full coverage. You go to larger employers, over 1,000, 20%. So let's think about the really big firms with the purchasing power that can absorb the risk, that can handle whatever it means to be self-insured or partially self-insured. All the big guys are doing that, okay? The reality is small guys can do self-insured by doing a partially self-insured. But let's step out of the healthcare discussion for a minute. I'll like Paul always offers to bet me $12. I guess that's the price of a hamburger and a root beer in Murfreesboro. It's because he always bets me $12 when I want to argue these things and debate them. And he's always right. So I'm not dumb enough to take a $12 bet. But anyway, reality is, every insurance you have in your personal life, in your corporate life, you have a deductible. You have it on your collision, on your cars, your personally, and your company cars. You got a $500, $1,000, or $2,000 collision deductible. You have it on the windows in your office building. You pay the first $1,000 for a roof leak, for a broken window. Same thing on workers' comp. You pay the first couple $1,000s of an injury claim and ER bill for a couple of reasons. They want you to have some skin in the game. And number two is it makes sense. Everybody's going to, the cheapest way to do it is have the first dollar paid by deductibles, not by the insurance company. Again, let's understand the structure. Every state has an insurance commissioner. The insurance commissioner allows every every carrier and every brokerage firm a certain overhead multiplier. If you do federal accounting, it's the FAR multiplier. They have 10, 15, 20% overhead factor, maybe more in some states, small markets. Okay. So you automatically, let's say you've got a 20% markup just to cover their overhead. And then the state commissioners, because they're generally political and supported by lobbyist firms, figure out the politics here, folks, is they then say, well, they deserve a 15% return, 15% profit margin for being in the brokerage business. So all of a sudden, that dollar claim you have, and let's do it this way. You have a $500 window to get the glass replaced, but the glass shop gives you a bill for $695. And you say, what's the extra $195 for? Well, that's the margin I'm allowed to recover, and that's the overhead I'm allowed to cover. So I charge you because you're willing to pay it through your insurance. So I should charge you $695. You fire that glass shop because you know it's a $500 window replacement. But you're doing that every day in healthcare. Every doctor's visit, every prescription, maintenance prescription, every lab test, you're paying. You absolutely want your employees to get annual physicals. Of course, you want them to do the insulin and every other maintenance drug because it's much cheaper to keep a maintained employee than an employee with episodes where they're in the emergency room. So everybody agrees we want to encourage that. Yet you do two things wrong. You have a fully insured plan, and then you have a high deductible, high copay plan, which makes the healthy employee not spend any money in January, February, March until they need to. And then it's a $5,000 emergency room bill instead of $80 a month or $200 a month for insulin and lab tests. Healthcare has it backwards because we're dumb enough to let them sell us insurance differently than anybody else. So I hate to be blunt, but I'm a pretty blunt guy. So yeah, I learned this the hard way, guys. 25 years, not the smartest tool in the shed, but I also wasn't in charge where I worked for the first 25 years of my career. So how did I learn this stuff? I had a broker, but I went out and hired an advisor. I hired a firm like Paul, a guy like Paul, to sit on my side of the table, explain the information to me, explain the options, and coach me through renewals, coach me through employee meetings, coach me through why this makes sense. They sat on my side of the table. They were my buddy. I paid them directly as an advisor. And the bottom line is I reduced my health costs well over 50%, even after including what I pay my advisor. And I wouldn't do it any other way. This is why groups like Paul's are very successful. This is why CFOs that use advisors are best in class, upper quartile. Okay, let me give you an example. I'm going to say, Paul, there's 30 or 40 tricks as best practices. I've covered the basic ones that CFOs ought to have here, and just understanding trends and investigating, alternatives to fully, first dollar coverage. But let me just give you an example. Every one of us sees a TV ad all the time that basically say, if you're unable to afford this drug, and then to insert the name, Pfizer, Gilead, et cetera, may be able to provide this drug for free or at a very low cost. They're called the manufacturers assistance plans, MAPs, sometimes PAPs. Okay, but I'm just going to ask a very simple question. Do any of you, your family, or your employees take monthly maintenance drugs? And absolutely do. Cholesterol, antidepressants, blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, there's many of them. They're the TV ads. Okay, but the bottom line is these are very expensive drugs, and with copay, prescriptions are going up 25-30% per year. Copays are going up even faster. So this is really, really expensive for employees. Just ask yourself, hey, Mr. Broker, give me a list of all the monthly maintenance prescription drugs we used last year. I don't want to know the employee's name. I don't want to know the dependent's name. I don't care if it's male, female, 30 years old, 20 years old, 70-year-old users. I don't want anything that violates HIPAA. I just want to see the kind of drugs we paid for on our prescription plan. Okay? Because you want to look for a fair amount of the monthly prescription drugs. They're very obvious. Okay. And then you want to ask him one question. Is there a cheaper way for my employees to get these monthly prescription drugs? And Paul, is a broker ever going to talk about the MAP programs that you could be in?
Generally not if they're a retail broker.
Yeah, generally not. That's how about 99% of the time. No. Okay. But if you had an advisor, B, a partially self-funded alternative plan, as Paul likes to call them, and not a first dollar full bore plan, you would have the option to get these drugs for a lot of your employees for free, dramatically reducing their copay and their deductible spending out of their pocket after tax money, or just out of their pocket. Okay. But keep in mind, you're always paying part of that. When they're paying the copay, you're paying the rest of the pay. So the employee gets the drug free. The company gets the drug at a very, very low cost, if not free. Most of us, HR will not know how to do this. Most CFOs will not know how to do it. The reality is there are third-party people that your advisor knows that are experts in doing this. That's one example. There's 15 or 20 more. Okay, and probably at least 10 of those are in the prescription area. Then you can get into competitive shopping for knee replacements or MRIs or X-rays, et cetera, et cetera. Trying to keep this to 30 minutes. Assuming you got a January 1 renewal, it is now time to start working on your renewal. Your broker is not going to return your call for 6 weeks because he doesn't know anything. He's going to tell you, well, I'm waiting for your 9-month actual so we can get you the best price possible. Your price is pretty much determined in July or August, what you're going to pay. It's pretty much irrelevant to what your actual spend is going to be for the 3 months they don't have data on. They've already solved for what they're going to charge small, medium, and large plans. And they have some latitude if they need to discount a little bit to keep you happy so you don't walk. Okay. So, tomorrow, contact an advisor. I certainly recommend PCS advisors because I've used them, trust them, they're good. But contact an advisor. Don't even tell your broker, and start reviewing your plan with an advisor. He's going to ask you 20 questions or more. He's going to go through it. He's going to have some ideas, lickety split, and listen to your advisor. You're still going to get your renewal from your broker, in late October or November. If you push them, you might get it in late October, but your advisor is going to be 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of that broker. And if it means canning your broker or demanding a different structure that looks like a partially self-funded plan, that's what your advisor is for. If you want to see more of this, go to cfosolution.org. We've got a portal. It's real easy. PCS. When you click on that portal, it's going to ask you for the password. Just hit enter because we've already programmed. If you're like me, I can't remember all the passwords. So we just build it in for anybody on this call. Just click it and you're into behind our firewall. You'll see 75 topics, of which probably 10 are on healthcare. So we spend hours going through some of these topics with case studies and Zoom presentations and smart guys like Paul explaining this stuff to us. So Paul, I'm on the 2:30 mark. Anything to add before we toggle to the other set of slides?
I would simply say that it's pretty easy for an advisor. It's a pretty small lift for a CFO and a pretty small lift for an advisor to take a high level look at what's going on and provide conservatively what's possible. That's a week or two turnaround, pretty easy to do. And then you know where you stand. And that's oftentimes a good place to start.
And Paul, let me just ask you one not rehearsed question. How many times do you walk into a place and not find 10 or 20% savings, best practices that are win-wins for the employees and the employer?
It's very rare.
Very rare. Okay. But somehow every year when I bitch to my broker, to use that word, he never has any ideas why, but he's going to convince me that the market's going up 15, but I got you 14 or 13, and let's go out to lunch someplace nice and let's go play golf. I'll do my final sarcasm. no data points other than my own life. I'm always stunned how the healthcare sales guy, the broker, takes you out to lunch to a place I can't afford to take my wife to. I can, but I'm just frugal. But in other words, he takes me to lunch someplace, and he's always driving a nicer car than I am. He's always taking me to a club that he belongs to, and he's the sales guy. I've never seen a guy show up in a 4-year-old Ford taking a CFO out to lunch at Red Robin. Okay. So maybe he's got a bigger expense account, but I'm always amazed at what healthcare brokers earn, even at the quote broker sales level, because there's that much money in healthcare. So I promised I'd switch topics. I'll take a breath. So as you all know, or if you've been doing this for more than a month or two, Paul challenges me to take hours and hours of best practices that we handle in our face-to-face meetings with CFOs. By the way, this whole concept of CFO solution has resulted from 115 or 120 CFOs and controllers getting together once a month for the last 8 years and solving each other's problems, bringing subject matter experts to the group and documenting their best practices. So we're no smarter than anybody on this call. It's just that we've got 8, me and 7 other CFO controllers, where we put this ebook together, where we're just cataloging best practices that we have vetted as a group of anywhere from, typically, if we attack a topic like healthcare, we've got 35 to 50 CFOs working on this for a couple of months, where we beat up bad ideas, good ideas, what works for small companies, what works for large companies. So we didn't wake up really smart one day. We didn't buy a book and just put our logo on it. We actually wrote this stuff out and vetted it. And, we've done a lot of these ourselves. Just before I leave healthcare, in my company, we implemented 3 or 4 best practices. We could have implemented 3 or 4. We went for the 3 biggest impact, best impact for our employees and our firm. Okay. And we let some other things lie because we just didn't want to keep changing plans. We never changed networks. We have the same exact plan we had 7 years ago, same network, same doctors. We put no stress on our employees, yet we reduced their costs dramatically and reduced the company's cost dramatically when everybody else is going sky high and employees are getting whacked. But back to this point, I apologize for digressing. We cover 2 topics a month. What I'm going to cover here in 3 minutes each, or less, is what we've covered since December. So we've looked at how to reduce costs, how to run finance like a profit center, human capital improvement. That's an interesting soft concept. All about facility and facility leasing and operating costs, why a CFO should be involved in safety, how a CFO should not ever be surprised by an exit, a sale, or merger acquisition of your company. And last, what a CFO should know about in cyber. So let's talk about cost reduction. Okay. And I'm kind of blending 2 concepts together. Is you can always reduce costs. The obvious ones in finance are just, certain third-party costs, banking fees, credit card fees, your auditor fee, certain software that you buy, etc. I contend you need to do all of those every day, but you really ought to be thinking about, how can I add value to the company? In other words, how can I close the books in 6 days instead of 12 days? How can I provide information through KPIs and dynamic results every week, every month? So finding out your overtime is twice what you budgeted, twice what it was last month, and the 15th day of the following month is, what the hell are you going to do about it? You know what the overtime level is every time you process payroll, every time you input payroll. So if you input payroll on a Monday morning, if overtime was out of control in certain departments last week. If you wait 4 weeks to tell that operating manager, that is shame on you. And I always say, don't worry about it. The next CFO will do a much better job. They'll figure it out. So if you're fat, dumb, and happy, complacent, closing the books on the 12th day, issuing a bunch of canned reports on the 15th workday. Don't be surprised when you're looking for a job. And it's not going to be a good CFO job, because you weren't doing a good CFO job if you're continuing the status quo. Let's come back to cost reduction now. And I've combined, a couple of topics here in one. Is first of all, run finance like a profit center. Be concerned about your costs. I always ask this question. When you do a budget, you have sales and look at sales overhead and commission plans and travel expense and outings and trade shows, and you beat them up in front of the CEO and you knock down their spending by $100,000. Do you ever do your own review of finance to the CEO and the board and say, here's what finance and accounting costs. Here's our trend. Here's our productivity. Here are our goals. And I'm budgeting 3 to 5% less. In other words, I'm looking for 5% productivity, with 7% inflation. My budget's up 2%. I think I can do better, but I'm budgeting a real increase of 2%. Most people never, ever put finance under a spotlight. They kind of push it off and go beat up all the other staff functions, sales, engineering, quality. They beat them up to a 2 or 3% spending growth. And keep in mind, they're growing if the business is growing. They're driven by the heuristics of the business. More samples, more customers, more deliveries. All that stuff is real. Finance shouldn't be growing as the business is growing. So I would contend, figure out your process, gather, validate, and close the books in 5 or 6 days. Have meaningful reports every week. Formal reports, informal reports by the 8th or 9th workday that are understood by your clients, not by the GAAP. Don't write them for the bankers or the auditors. Explain them to the people that use that information. And then, like I said, set an example of driving productivity and outside spending, et cetera, productivity, staff upgrades. Then you can be an ally to the other functional groups instead of being the cost cop and the critic. Very, very different acceptance when all of a sudden you're a legit, credible ally instead of being the cost cop, the tattletales to the CEO. Sales is really over budget, but they didn't pay the one expense, from June 30th. They pushed it to July. Guys, don't be that kind of finance person. Okay, let's go to the next one. Every CEO stands up in front of his employees and stands up in the website and says, our people are our greatest asset. And I've yet to see a really good human capital plan that treats assets better than they treat the maintenance schedule in your machinery or your trucks. Everybody knows when the truck needs to be inspected, the oil changed, and it's on a schedule. But are performance reviews done? Are training assessments done? Are skill assessments done? Are they done professionally with the employees and the new hires so everybody understands what's expected? When you implement a new system, when you downsize and things have to be eliminated or done faster, smarter, better, does a plan exist? I'm going to contend in most companies it doesn't. And I'll be honest, in my company, we have to pay attention to this because our technology changes and sometimes we get a little sloppy and just assume people know that technology change is going to cost money, take training time, and somehow you have to get it done while you get the rest of your job done. So we're not perfect. But I come back to, does your company have, ask yourself this, as you watch new hires coming on board and vacancies and postings, does your company have a process to recruit, to plan for human capital needs, first of all, and then to recruit, hire, which means recruit, select, interview, hire, offer, onboard, train them first 60, 90, 180 days, and then continue to train them so they're a good employee doing a good job. They're not quitting after 6 or 8 months and starting the whole process over. And they become long-term employees with a career plan in the future. I'd like to see everybody put their hand up. We don't have the cameras all turned on, but my point is very, very few companies have a process for human capital. You guys are going to say that's what HR is supposed to do. I'm going to say not really, because HR doesn't understand the growth plan for the company. They don't understand CapEx. They don't understand all those. We forget how much information we know about this company that other senior executives, other senior managers don't know. They know if we can't afford the CapEx. They know if we're planning to downsize. They know if we're planning to do an acquisition. We know about CapEx requirements or compliance requirements, all the things that they're at the tail end of the whip. And they're not informed that, hey, we're putting a new SAP system in. So there's some people that aren't going to get it. We're going to spend a lot of time training. You're going to spend a lot of time training. Overtime is going to go up. Oh, we'll assume you have to do it during the day. Well, then an order's not going out the door, or somebody's going to get hurt. So again, we see it from the catbird seat and can see that perspective. If you don't have that built into your human capital, training, hiring, replacement needs, it's also not rocket science to look at when you got a workforce that's got 20% people over 60 years old, you're going to deal with retirements. Flip it around. You got a workforce that's 25% 18 to 25-year-olds. You better assume 10 to 15% attrition, because that's common in that age group. And I don't care whether they're high school graduates or college graduates. College graduates change jobs even faster than high school dropouts. So if you haven't looked at it with the heuristics, use the data, use the analysis, help HR do that analysis. You've got the data or access to the data. You know how to do the analysis. Don't expect HR to be as analytical as the CFOs or the FP&A people on your team. Once you have a human capital plan, look at the process. Let me know if the process works. We spent a lot of time, in all modesty, our human capital process maps and write-ups and training have been recognized by 2 governors as best-in-class processes, and actually been shared by the governors of Pennsylvania and Missouri as something small companies should do. So we're kind of proud of that because it kind of works. Let's pivot to another topic. Let me catch a breath here. Paul, anything obvious? Any questions? I've just rattled through 3 months of stuff in 10 minutes. So anything that I need to clarify before I move on?
No, I think we're doing great. We're on track. I'm enjoying it. I'm learning a lot through each of these sessions, and we'll make sure everybody gets the right follow-up after this with the recording and the easy ability to link into more detailed information on each topic through the portal.
Great. One of these days I'm going to do a poll of CFOs. If you knew the job was this tough, would you have chosen a different field 20 or 30 years ago? Because it is a 7-day-a-week job. You worry about stuff a lot more than the debits and credits. You're worrying about, do we have the people? Is there a supply chain bottleneck? Can we get the capital? What the hell's this PPP, ERTC alphabet soup mean? And why can't HR do it? Why can't somebody else do it? The bottom line is, where risk and resources intersect, the CFO's got to be involved, like it or not. You can be proactive or reactive, but the job is a lot tougher than I thought it was. I thought it was a pretty simple finance and accounting job, and in the private companies, which is where your space and my space is, job's a lot tougher than I thought it was. I came from big Fortune 100, Fortune 200 firms for 25 years of my life. Went to Welcome to America, small, mid-sized businesses. It's like, where's all the experts? Why didn't HR have this, the analytical horsepower and the software they need? Because they can't afford it. They don't have the same quality people. They don't have the need for it, theoretically. They certainly can't afford it. So back on point, another topic where why is the CFO involved in facility operations? I'm covering 2 slides at once here, folks. As you look at this, start off, again, big companies have real estate departments that have strategic plans, that have unlimited capital for market studies and can buy a building, retrofit a building, expand a building. We don't have those luxuries. But I sit back, 30,000 foot level, is CFO should be looking at facility decisions strategically. In other words, there's companies out there, and I know them well. They've been at the same place for 30 years, and it is a perfect location for their customer, for their employees, for their logistics. Yet they still rent the building. They never bit the bullet to buy. The building was $1 million 20 years ago. Now that same building is $5 million, or at a zero, $50 million. And now they struggle to afford the rent, but tomorrow that could be a CVS or a Walgreens, and they have 6 months notice they're not renewing your 5-year lease or your 3-year lease. On one side, the landlord is offering you a 3-year renewal. He's not offering you a 5 or 10 year or an option to buy, because he wants to control you every 2.5 or 3 years. So we've got an excellent 2-hour session on managing real estate strategically. Number one, if the location's a really great location, there's reasons for you to stay there, you should own it. Or you should at least have a long-term lease with an option to buy it. If you can't afford to buy it because of your balance sheet, so be it, but cover your flank by having an option to buy, or at least a long-term lease so you can't get kicked out when CVS or Walgreens wants that location. Okay. Number two is, I'm stunned by people that say, hey, we want to put a sales office in Reno. The West Coast is growing. Let's put a sales office in Reno. Branch manager gets promoted, and he gets out there and he signs a 5-year lease on a beautiful office building. And he all of a sudden finds out he's in the wrong part of town. He's not near the customers. He's not near the airport, and he hates it. And a year later, the CEO says, let's find the right size, the right location. Let's put it in Vegas. Okay. All of a sudden, CFO is stuck with 4 years of remaining lease payment. You don't have a way to get out of it. Smart people sign a lease with a penalty clause up front that in the event, I'll pay 6 months lease if I have to break this. And I can only break it for a legitimate reason, whatever, then define those exogenous reasons. A landlord's going to take that deal half the time. Then you've at least defined, just, determined your downside is a 6-month notice. Realistically, you're going to need a couple months to move. So you might be paying 2 or 3 months in absolute penalty, maybe 1 month in absolute penalty if you get your act together, and walking away from 3 or 4 years of overhang because the branch manager didn't think through or didn't understand the new market enough, or where employees lived, or where the truck routes were, and where the airport was. Again, if you have property now, if you have multiple sites, I really encourage you to go out and look at our session called Managing Real Estate Strategically. There is a huge impact. Again, I benefited from the advisor in this case, where I actually was faced with a 10 or 15% increase in rent after a 3-year lease was expiring. And we went out with a 7-year lease proposal to the realtor, blew them away. And we kind of took the optimist side. We really love the building. You guys are great landlords, et cetera, et cetera. And we basically negotiated a 7-year lease. However, that 7-year lease had an exit clause for me in the 4th year. He reduced our rent 15%. Rather than a 15% increase, he reduced our rent 15% because he was looking at the total dollar value of a 7-year lease. Okay. Over $2 million for a small office. Okay. Where I was very comfortable that I was going to pay under $200,000 a year under the new lease. And I didn't have any intention of being there in 7 years. But my exit clause, the 7 years rent with escalators in years 4, 6, and 7, the arithmetic boggled his mind, and he accepted the lease. He also, to try to manage their balance sheet better, he actually gave us $45,000 to put a new break room in. We put that break room in, using local subcontractors, doing it at their convenience over a period of time. We put that in for under $20,000. We pocketed $25,000, got a new break room, and he didn't include it in the base cost of the lease. So we came out way ahead. Bottom line is, we approached the lease differently than the real estate guys did. It can be done. Now let's toggle to, okay, you like where you're at, you're stuck where you're at, you don't like where you're at, but we talked about renting and leasing. We have a lot of ideas on how to manage your lease, how to review a lease. The quick sidebar comment there is your corporate attorney probably sees leases once a month. Whether he's an in-house attorney, then he sees them once a year. If he's a third party, law firm you use, they just aren't experts in small real estate leases. They look for the glaring things, but they don't look for the optimizing clauses. So my point is, use a real estate lease expert to review it. You still use an attorney to write it up and redline it, but use somebody who really understands it. We have an advisor in our stable. He charges $300 to review your leases. 2-day turnaround. He charges you like 1 hour of what your attorney is going to charge you, but he actually has done thousands of leases. He's my right-hand guy for facilities. Back on facility operations. If you're paying utilities, natural gas, power to your local utility company, and you're not using a third-party expert, you're being taken advantage of. 40 states are deregulated. If you can buy your power deregulated, you ought to be looking at it. Solar is very attractive in a number of states. If you're not familiar with, if you're remotely considering solar, understand the new solution called CPACE, which is a loan program by many banks across the country. I believe this is available in every state, where it basically these are loans specially designed for energy efficiency investments, insulation, LED lighting, heat pumps, geothermal, solar, whatever I'm missing. They're as small as $50,000. They go up into the millions. Bottom line is, what's very unusual about CPACE, and we all understand this, interest is a tax deductible expense, but your principal payment is an after-tax cash flow expense. We all understand that. On CPACE, your principal is tax deductible. Shows up on your income statement as an expense. Okay, so you get the depreciation expense. You also get the principal payment as a deduction pre-tax. So yeah, it affects your pre-cash earnings, but you get to pay principal with a dollar that's worth 60 or 70 cents. Final point is 90% of the CPACE loans are non-recourse, no personal guarantees. So for the people on this call, if you're kind of maxed out with your bank debt, this is secondary to the bank debt. The energy efficiency investment is the collateral, so it doesn't require guarantees. It doesn't require intercreditor agreements. CPACE is a way that the industry is financing energy efficiency investments. Very, very few people know about it. Most of your traditional banks don't offer it because they don't have to. They want to have the collateral. They want to have all your personal guarantees. They want to have all your debt with their bank. They don't want you to use the third-party bank, but they can't stop you from doing it. Finally, on facility operations, a lot of you business guys out there have been hammered with business shutdowns and turndowns, pending recession, where if you're in the retail business or the hospitality business, your business is not what it was worth your facility will not assess on a cash flow basis what it was worth 3, 4, 5 years ago. You may not know it, but in most states, you can challenge your property tax assessment using an economic value model. In other words, take an example that I'm familiar with. 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be the next Tiger Woods. Way too many golf courses were built. They were high-priced courses, high in demand. The demand went down, maintenance costs went up. So all of a sudden, golf courses that used to make $1 million a year on $20 million of revenue, now we're losing $2 million a year on $15 million of revenue. And oh, by the way, the course isn't as attractive as it used to be. So no kidding, its market value has dropped. The county is not going to lower the assessment unless you challenge it. If you try to challenge it yourself, you will lose the county reassessment for school taxes and county taxes. Use a third-party expert. It's amazing how smart they are. Let's come to another topic, totally switching here. Preparing for an exit. If a CFO gets blindsided that his company is up for sale or about to merge, and the CFO didn't see it coming a year earlier, I don't know what you're thinking about. Again, catbird seat to see what's going on. Figure it out from one standpoint. You got a 67-year-old owner and a 65-year-old owner and a 60-year-old owner How do the two older guys value out? Well, if their kids are in the company, you then scratch your head and say, well, the kid can't afford to buy the old man out. The old man wants his money for two reasons. A, he earned it. B, the kid might screw it up. Statistically, second, third generations screw up family-run businesses. So the old, the senior owners, and take my example, the two older owners that are ready to roll are going to force that 60-year-old, because they're going to outvote the 60-year-old owner. Let's sell tomorrow. Do we sell to a PE firm? Do we sell to somebody else? They have to exit. They've got all their net worth tied up in the business. Again, some will have their kids that they want to pass it to. All of a sudden, Mr. CFO has to figure out, how do we do that? How do we raise the cash flow out of the business, or one way or another, in notes that the sellers will accept and the company can carry? Not surprising, DD&D, death, divorce, and disability. So when an owner dies, that's a pretty good sign. For estate reasons, the widow has to sell the business. It means you have to sell the business. Disability, similar but different, because there's ongoing costs. The seller still expects to get paid whatever his comp was. You need another body to take his or her job as CEO or COO. So there's another strain on it, but then they're still going to want to exit. So now you have another cash flow issue. And divorce, that's when the shit hits the fan, that you're not looking at a minor problem, you're looking at a 50% problem. And oh, by the way, it affects the other owners when the founder or one of the large shareholders is forced to sell for a liquidity event. Most of those can be predicted by a CFO who's thinking beyond last month's close. Think about it. Think about the shareholder profile. Think about what's going on in their retirement plans. Think about what's going on in the industry. If there's a consolidation happening, you want to be an early consolidator, not an end consolidator. Premiums are paid to the leaders and risk takers. So again, we do sessions on that. They've been pretty useful. Changing subjects completely. Why should the CFO be involved in safety? And I'll ask you a simple thing. Can you tell me what the cost of safety is for your company? Can you tell me how much each year for the last 3 years you've paid related to insuring and claims and accidents? Pretty simple arithmetic. Add up your premiums, add up your claims, your deductibles, add up what you spent in training dollars and training consultants, and put in whatever reserves are on your insurance policy for a claim that hasn't been settled yet, an injury that hasn't been settled, or any kind of, I'm talking personal injury here, hopefully not client industry. So first of all, you ought to know what you're paying for safety. So that's just an absolute number. Now, kind of the common metric is, well, safety, I'm paying $1 million a year for safety. I was paying $800,000 last year. My budget's $1.2 million this year, if I think through it. Is that good or bad? Well, I don't know, just that trend of numbers isn't good. But what if your payroll is going up 25% every year and you've added a facility? Well, let me think about it. And the metric that we've agreed on and proposed is cost of safety is the numerator, just divided by your total payroll dollars. Very easy number. W-2, 1099, easy number. You can get it any day you want it, and build out your 3-year trend. Then ask your workers' comp and your business advisors, what's normal for this business? I'm in the heavy construction business and skyscrapers in a unionized New York City. My safety model is ugly. We're probably second quartile. It's still expensive, but fourth quartile companies aren't in business anymore in our business. So first of all, there's ways to find out. I'll use the golf analogy. There's ways to find out what's par and what's bogey golf. At least get yourself, understand where you stand. Then understand the drivers. Do you have a back to work program? Is your workers' comp broker? Is your panel of physicians working with you? Do you even know? Are you reviewing your reserves? Do you just let your insurance carrier just keep claims open forever and just keep piling on reserves and spending legal money and employees taking advantage of? Like anything else, measure it, come up with a measure and a metric. So you have your gross spend, you have your metric, percent of payroll, cost of safety, and then report it. Report it every month, every quarter. Report it to your board. Get safety as a culture. It affects how brokers look at it and how employees look at it and potential employees. This company cares about safety. Okay. One or two more topics here. Cybersecurity. Huge. We have had some great speakers. One of our speakers was the former head of cybersecurity for the Department of Defense, a grunt Marine high school graduate who became the cybersecurity expert for DoD. He was literally coding stuff in the Marines 40 years ago. Full colonel, came out and worked for DoD. Then he ran the United Nations Task Force in cybersecurity and finished that assignment, first assignment in his non-military career. And he became cyber officer for a multi-billion-dollar pharma company. And he literally put all his knowledge down in one place. We brought him in. Absolutely staggering. Cybersecurity is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Most of us think if we're not taking credit cards, if we don't have personal client information, who's going to hack us? Well, the reality is it's not if, but when. What startled us is 40% of cybersecurity hacks are done by employees or former employees. They're mad about something, so they blow up their own company. Okay. There's a statistic out there. I don't have it on the slide. Something like 30% of companies that get hacked are not in business a year later. The average cost of a hack is approaching $1 million. And these are for $5 million businesses that they just don't recover. So you're all going to tell me, I got an IT guy. Well, your IT guy either understands your SAP program or your ERP or your network or your time card system. Not a cyber expert. Use a third-party advisor. Let them hack your system. Let them try to bust it up. Let them find your gaps, your weaknesses, your controls. You're going to find out that you can fix a third of this. You can reduce your cyber risk by having the right controls in place. On new hires, on former hires, on who, not everybody in the company needs access to everything. People have read access. Believe me, we found it in our own companies. We took the easy way out. They might need access to that. And of course, we protect payroll data and invoice data, but we had employees with way too much access. And sometimes it was a mistake they made. Sometimes they just went in and wanted to destroy data to get even with somebody else who took their parking space. We've heard more stupid stories. Like, guy took my parking space, so I blew up his procurement log, and it killed supply chain. So again, use a third party. Don't expect your IT people to have the skills or the time to do cyber. And by the way, cyber insurance is ridiculously expensive right now. Very limited on what it covers, very high deductibles. And all that's doing is buying you a new barn after the other barn with the animals in it burned down. So again, you got an IT person, they don't report to you. Maybe they do report to you. They're not cyber people, use a third party. There's almost in concluding all of this, and I'm 5 minutes over, I apologize. There's a common beat here. You can't know all this stuff yourself. Your procurement manager, your facility manager, your IT person, your HR people, they can't know all this stuff in a small company. So humble yourself and use outside experts. It is that simple. Use a healthcare advisor, use a cyber advisor. You know, a lot of good business brokers will have a safety person on their team. They're not the salesperson, they're the safety person, they're the risk management person. Use those people, demand that they partner with you. Again, if you need information, there's the link. Phone number is real easy. I answer my own phone, or send me an email. So as we wrap up, Paul, what do you got to add?
I'm not going to add a thing. That was great. Thanks, except to say thank you again for making time for this.
My pleasure.
We'll make sure everyone gets a good follow-up communication so that you can dig into any of these topics that rang true for you or seemed important that you'd like to learn more about. And I know Gary makes himself available and all of that. So
thank you. So Paul, we're going to do this again on the third Wednesday of August, whatever that date is. I don't have my calendar open, but a month from now, we'll do it again at the same time, same place. Paul's team coordinates all that. One of our topics will be more on healthcare because you folks are about to go into that insanity season. I'm trying to help you not go not do the same with different expectations. So we're going to peel back another layer of healthcare and find some best practices. I told you there are over 20 of them. We covered 3 or 4 today. So we'll get a little more granular. And then we'll pick a second topic that's of general interest to CFOs. If you have heartburn or angina, you want me to address something else, give me a shout. We have 75 presentations in the can that we've done that we can boil down to an executive summary, or we can address some new topics. So with that, I wish everybody well, stay cool. Where I'm at, it's hot as hell. So I hope you're cool, and happy hour is only a couple hours away from me. So with that, I'll wrap it up.
Thanks again, and we'll get follow-up communication out to everyone soon.
Thanks.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
See you.